So the vast majority of my own art training was done in my studio at home without any instruction. I don't consider myself self-taught. I learned a little bit from in-person classes here in Southern California, but none of them were teaching the kind of stuff that I really wanted to learn. So I had to kind of dig down and learn from books, learn from videos, learn from blogs, learn from social media, whatever I could get my hands on. Inevitably, if you're like me, you'll run into what is called choice paralysis. Choice paralysis is a phenomenon that happens when we have a wealth of possibilities, a wealth of choices. We can do quick sketch, 5 to 20 minute figure poses, 3-hour poses, 4-hour poses, 12-hour poses, 60-hour poses. Do I focus on drawing or do I focus on painting? What kind of drawing? Is it line drawing or is it tonal drawing? Should I be rendering everything? Should I be stumping everything or should I not be stumping? Should I be using Loomis? So if you can relate to that, all those things going in your head, this video will be for you. I'm going to talk about strategies and ideas that I use to break through all the noise, get my head down, and get to studying. So that's the most important thing. Everyone says it, and it's true. The most important thing is practice. Ridiculous amount of the practice are what's going to get us to where we need to be. And that's what we're about to talk about. So we're not going to get to those ridiculous levels of practice if we're pulled off in every direction, following every method under the sun. But here are some definite tips I can give you. Don't take them as dogmas. These are just suggestions. These are the things that I felt work for me. First thing I kind of recommend is if you're having a tough time sort of choosing a method, choosing a way to practice, whether it's I want to draw portraits with the Loomis method or I want to draw sight size with a straight line block in. Stick with that for 3 months. It's not a huge commitment, but I found 3 months is a good amount of a commitment to really dig down and get the water boiling so I can start to understand the concepts of whatever it is. I think I had the fear when I was kind of newer, what if I pick the wrong one? What if I pick one that damages me? What if Riley method is bad for me? What if sight size is bad for me? It's going to harm me in some way. It's going to make it so I can't become a good painter. I think most of that is nonsense. I think there's many ways up the mountain, but what's most important is that we choose the method that is sort of calling to us. There's probably a sign there if it's calling to us that there's something inside us that responds to that particular way of working. So kind of follow through with that. Like I remember I would try to get so hardcore with myself. Like I'm only going to study drawing casts for 1 year, no painting, no nothing, just drawing casts. And it wouldn't, I would fizzle out in like 3 weeks, you know, because it was too strict, you know, and maybe it's just a personality thing. Maybe I'm a little ADHD or whatever. Without that sort of being in an academy or an atelier or art school or whatever, without that social pressure, that competitiveness, the financial pressures of that, it's very easy to lose steam. So in a sense, we need to sort of ride the wave of our attention, ride the wave of the things that we're interested in. For me personally, I found that doing master copies was the best way to have plenty of material to pull from that I can practice as often as I had a moment to practice. Whenever I had 2 hours to practice, I knew I had a master copy somewhere in the computer. I could pull it up, I could start. Early on, I kind of fell for the belief that you shouldn't work from photographs. I don't believe that anymore. And I eventually adopted the belief that if you are going to work from photographs, it's good to counter it with master copies. Master copies are showing us how the master designed shapes, did composition, designed their values, designed their brushwork, their color, all these things that the photograph will kind of lie to us about or not give us enough information about. So after about 3 months of doing nothing but master copies, I would inevitably get bored. I'd have to move on to something else. Then I would move on to, say, portraits in graphite. And I would study portraits in graphite with a straight line block-in method, going for a relatively high finish, trying not to spend more than about 15 hours on a drawing. Which brings me to another point. Another wide variety of choice that we have, which I touched on at the beginning, is how long do I work on a study? I found that there's a definite point of diminishing returns after about 15 hours or so. I know some ateliers teach very long 60-hour plus drawings. I don't have a negative opinion about that. It's just not something I'd want to do. And I found that learning fell off after about 12 to 15 hours for me. A side note, if you really love spending 50 hours, 60 hours on a drawing, that's a fully valid thing to do. We don't need to be so dogmatic about it. We're trying to find the method, the approach, the time limit, the duration that is right for our personality. So if you really love doing that, then 100% do that. So another thing I would do is I would sort of hoard every instructional video I could find from wildly different ways of approaches, and sometimes I would buy them and not even watch them. I don't know if you can relate to that, but what I found that was helpful for me when I had all those video choices to kind of watch and choose from was that when I was in that 3-month duration where I was focusing down on a specific thing, I would only watch videos that were within that realm. Maybe it was a much tighter painter, a much form-focused painter, or maybe it was a looser painter, a much more alla prima painter. So I would stick in those arenas. So I would only look at information from those people, and I would try everything I could to avoid flying off into another dimension when I saw some other work that I was like, ooh, I want to do that, you know. I did everything I could do to sort of maintain the integrity of that 3-month path of just sticking with what I'm doing and not looking back. And it may not be 3 months for you. It could just be a month. It could be 2 months. You really need to kind of find what's going to work for you, the amount of time that's going to work for you. So when we get to the end of any of our sort of theoretically 3-month time period where we focus on a specific way of working, inevitably we come across, or I would come across, a number of weaknesses that were made very apparent during that period. It's good to sort of note them and remember them so that on my next 3-month mission, I can start introducing those in. So say it was anatomy. So if I'm drawing a portrait or drawing a figure, I'd bring out the anatomy books and study anatomy in the context of the project I'm working on. I was never anyone that could just really sit there and read anatomy and just memorize it. But if I'm studying anatomy within the context of a specific project where I'm having a problem that I need a solution to, I can become much more interested in finding the solution to that problem, finding what all of those things are in the forearm or what those bumps are on the face. Another thing we can do to avoid choice paralysis is having a set area where we can work every single day, that we don't have to put it up and put it down, put it up and put it down. There's just another roadblock in front of us that we have to sort of jump over. It's another choice we have to make that's going to paralyze us. We have to make that choice to get all our stuff, put it together. I understand not everyone has the opportunity or the ability to have a specific space made for drawing or painting, but it's something I definitely recommend to at least have a goal in mind at some point when you can. Get an easel set up, a monitor, something you can work from photos and do master copies from, some good lighting over your painting. I'll make another video about lighting at some point because it is pretty important, but don't get too perfectionist with it. As long as you have a space that you can just go to and paint or draw without too much effort and too much upstart, then you're going to be in good shape. And finally, something I want to stress to everyone learning by themselves without instruction, and this is maybe something that many of you don't want to hear, but I think it's an important reality to understand so that we don't set ourselves up for failure, is that it's probably going to take longer to get better than you would if you were in like a 4-year program drawing, 12 hours a day, painting 12 hours a day. That's just reality. That's the reality I had to face. I couldn't go to an atelier or an art school or anything like that. So I had to have expectations that I'm not going to improve as fast as somebody that's doing it that fast. That's just the reality. That's okay. We just got to deal with the cards we've been dealt. It took me 15 years before I ever started showing in galleries or selling paintings and becoming, solvent with this art career path that I'm on. So we have to give ourselves that expansiveness and openness that it's going to take some time. And I had times where I didn't paint for like a year and a half or something, I would just go fishing or something because I felt like I wasn't getting good enough. This wasn't for me. But I always found that any sort of activity I would do besides painting or drawing to be pretty shallow and not as fulfilling at a deep kind of purpose level that painting did. So I always ended up coming back to it. So just because you have a break or whatever doesn't mean you're not a real artist. Just because you haven't painted for a year, 5 years, 10 years doesn't mean it's not possible for you. It just means it takes a long time. Like Bouguereau in the French Academy, he studied something like 13 years or something like that. Something crazy, before he became professional. I read that Jerome was even longer than that. Many of the old masters, they started when they were like 8, 9 years old and became professional in their early 20s, but it was many, many years of those fundamental early years of training before they were good enough for any anyone to pay any attention to them. So I hope this helps. You know, I feel an affinity with you guys. Anyone that can't make it to an atelier, can't afford to go to wherever, Europe or New York or wherever, these really awesome schools. I would have gone if it was in the cards for me, but I couldn't. So I had to make it work myself, and you can make it work yourself too. So in closing, minimize your choices by picking a direction. Anyone that's feeling good for you. Like all the ones I mentioned in the beginning, Riley, Sight Size, 19th Century Academic. You're taking a class with me, you're taking an online class at like GCA or like Stephen Bauman's Patreon, any of those. Stick with it for some time. Get some of that water boiling. And if you get bored with me, you get bored with Steven, you get bored with any of these other options out there, move on to the next thing. You know, having a wide variety of influences is going to help you out in the long run. Anyways, thanks for watching. I host regular online Zoom classes. They're 5 weeks on, 5 weeks off. Check the link in the description to check those out. You can find me on Instagram at ValentineBen. And just get to painting. Get those hours in. Let's do it.